Hey Tony, it's Thursday, and first off, I'm no longer sick with COVID, so I'm actually doing this video. Second off, to answer your question of the week, I think you set it up pretty well. Though I have some disagreements. I don't necessarily think the group has a leader per se, because the Witcher game is not about a team with a leader or anything like that. There are some games that are certainly like that. I think D&D can, in a lot of ways, go with like the face leader type thing, as can a game like Death Watch, because Death Watch you can absolutely have like your sergeant, which is a 40k game. But I think that the way you set up is pretty close, though. I think it's a little different just because of like since isn't about the 5-man band, because you could argue that Haleth is the big guy, but you could also argue that Haleth is the Lancer because she works pretty closely with Catalani. You could even argue that she would be the leader because she's the one who takes point in a lot of monster investigations. So I don't know if it necessarily fits in the Witcher game, but I think the way you put it was pretty solid. So what I want to talk about this week is, of course, the reason why I didn't make a video last week was because I had COVID, and it sucked. It sucked for sure. It wasn't severe. I ended up getting a fever on Thursday and Friday, and ended up just being exhausted the whole weekend. Had a pretty bad cough. I'm coughing a little bit now, but it's pretty much completely symptom. I'm pretty much completely symptom free now, which is great. We'll see if the test I took today is going to come back as negative or positive, but there's certain things I want to talk about involving COVID and just this shared trauma we've all been going through for 2 years. Because there's a lot there, and it's even regards of like, for example, I do basically everything that I need to make sure that myself and my family stay safe. Every time I go out, I'm masked, fully vaxxed, fully boosted, avoid in-person entanglements as much as I can. And I believe I caught this last thing either in court, because even though I was fully masked, the court was not socially distanced, and I don't really have the power to socially distance at court because I'm not the judge, it's not my courtroom. Or Justice could have brought it home from his work because he had someone who wasn't feeling well and coughed like at his desk. So he tested negative, I tested positive, so that we just don't know. But it's COVID has completely changed the story of our generation, and I don't even think that's being hyperbolic. I think for your Gen Xers, your millennials, and your baby boomers, this particularly for the actually, sorry, not for the baby boomers, for the Zoomers is what I meant to say. But for like the millennials, Gen Zs, and Gen Xers, I think like COVID will be the most defining point of our lives. At least it has been up to this point. Like, you could make the argument that 9/11 could have been a massive moment in our lives as well, because it was. I mean, the entire past 20 years, 21 years really, have all been revolved essentially around 9/11 and actions that have been taken since then. And COVID I think will end up having that same position in popular culture that something like 9/11 does. And I don't mean popular culture as in like, movies and shows and things like that, though certainly there will be something about the pandemic when it's over, because Hollywood loves beating dead horses. But that the shared trauma that we've all gone through for this year, and this I can even bring in the baby boomers into this as well, has been terrible. I mean, there have been over 800,000 Americans killed and well over a million worldwide. Like, well over several million worldwide, I'm pretty sure. Um, so there's that. We obviously have how it completely changed pretty much everything. Again, that's not even being over dramatic. Like, think of how much our work life has changed. Think about how much our social lives have changed. Think about how much school has changed for children in schools. All because of this disease that has been mishandled from the start. And with so few people there were not people who got vaccinated, which is why we're getting these variants pop up. And it's brought up a couple of really dark and difficult subjects that we're gonna have to broach for the next 20 years. For example, like the world governments have done very little to help stem the tide. You've certainly seen places locked down, but even then you turned into like major protests because I can't get my hair cut and now I want to start a riot. You have a lot of authoritarian regimes are kind of using COVID to strengthen their own causes, and you can look at our elections to kind of using COVID and using mail-in ballots as a way to doubt an election was resolved. And we are still, I mean, the election was well over a year ago. Like January 6th was over a year ago as well. And all of these things are coming together, and we'll be dealing with the fallout for 20 years, if not longer, because this is such a defining moment. Like, I think of some things that I've learned during the pandemic, and that is you can do everything required, but if someone doesn't, then your sacrifices are in vain. There are two different types of people: those who are willing to sacrifice what they need to for a public betterment, and those who won't. You also have people who are like, you also see the issues with misinformation. I mean, you look at vaccines. What would have been, you would almost think, commonplace 20 years ago is now doubtful. Like, some people doubting it. There's so many echo chambers and so many ways to push misinformation that you have those people who can be easily swayed by misinformation, which is everyone. Like, if you get stuck into your echo chamber, you don't necessarily hear anything else, then you're not going to be able to fight off against the misinformation campaigns. And you've seen all of this kind of result itself in a ruling class that is kind of just thought it was more important to keep the economy rolling, to make sure that, you know, their shareholders get profits, than they are to make sure, you know, people who aren't their shareholders survive. And I think that's certainly a failure of our modern day capitalism, but it's also just a failure of our modern day governments, just a failure of modern day tech and all of those echo chambers. And COVID has shown all of these failures to be right in front and center of everyone. And the worst part is I'm not convinced we've learned anything. Now, hopefully, after COVID, we're not going to have another pandemic in our lives. I would never want anyone to go through a pandemic after being in one. And I'm pretty sure COVID's going to be around forever, just like the flu. And I'm pretty sure like the COVID booster is going to become the new flu shot, in which you get it every 6 months. But even still, like, some of these foundational problems, those structural problems that COVID has shown, have not been resolved. And I'm not convinced our people in power are going to resolve them. So it's going to be up to, you know, your Gen Xers and your Millennials and your Zoomers, when you guys get your chance, to try and rectify these structural flaws. I have hopes that after going through this, those who are a little more public-minded might be able to actually do something, but we'll see. So Tony, my question for you are, what are some of the lessons you've learned from COVID? Tony, I'll see you hopefully later tonight for the Witcher battle. Otherwise, I'll see you on Tuesday. Later, bro.